Hello, welcome to Free Will, Science, and Religion. I'm Chandler Klebs, and I'm here with Quayd, Poffo, Peter, Trick, and George Ortega. And we're going to talk about how people can improve themselves and how we can improve society without free will. Because a lot of people, when they hear the message that we don't have free will, they think, oh, well, then how can we improve? We can't become any better and we can't change the circumstances in life that we don't like. And it's like there's a lot of misunderstandings among the lay people about what it means to not have free will. And it doesn't mean that we can't change and things can't improve. It just means we can't take credit for it when we do. So how should we go about this topic, guys?
It strikes me at first, actually, when you say that, how it's kind of a parallel to people who believe in like predestination, maybe the Calvinists and stuff, and it's just like everything I do is because of God, and I have no strength on my own, and it's all Him moving through me. And so, in a reverse kind of way, it's like I could see how people would think of it like that we're just puppets, that we're being controlled, that we don't, that we have no say in it. So it's a little more nuanced. I think the important thing, I've always said this to you guys, that like I wouldn't go around telling people that they don't have free will. I would explain causality. I would explain determinism. I would explain like, that how everything is interrelated with everything else, in the sense that like it's not that we're in a vacuum making decisions, without anything influencing us. So.
Yeah, as Poffo says, he kind of brought up the kind of religious notions of fatalism, which I think a lot of people conflate fatalism with determinism. So when we say, people lack free will, a lot of times their mind will revert to this more fatalistic notion. In reality, it's more of a deterministic notion, which means our thoughts and our conscious thoughts actually are part of the process of, what we think, say, and do. So what we think, leads to the next event. And so if we think let's improve on something, that's part of that causal process. Whereas fatalism says no matter what you think, say, or do, you're fated to this one specific.
Right. That there's already like a destiny marked out for you. That everything's already written pretty much, and like no matter what you do, even if you think it's the craziest action or activity, well, that was also included in the fate and the right. Sort of the programming that was already laid out. I know the difference.
Part of predestination basically is that it's not dependent on causality. You don't need causality to be predestined. It just means you are predestined no matter what, causality or not. Whereas determinism is a process. It's a process of one event leading to the next, and we're part of that process. And if we're part of that process, then what we think, say, and do is part of the process, and we can our thought process of thinking about how to improve and stuff like that leads to the next event.
See, if you explain it that way, I mean, it's much more palatable. I think people will be much more receptive to it. Than just coming right out and saying we don't have free will, like explain the actual process,
I kind of wonder about, if I could interject a question, is that I know this tends to be a philosophical question, but ultimately we come down to the layperson, and the layperson wants to know if determinism and lack of so-called free will does not equate to being stuck in a kind of locked fate, then effectively what should it teach us, or what does the lesson of determinism tell the layperson in terms of their motivations in a moment-to-moment choice making?
Like what's the takeaway? Like what we get out of it?
Right, because I feel like in a lot of ways what people do take away is that they don't really have a choice, or that they lack responsibility in their choice, both of which I think are sort of ethically unfounded, or at least I find there's difficulty in that, because it does create this fatalistic impression.
They take it to the extreme.
No matter what I do,
they go to the extreme.
Well, if we denote determinism, it's not that they lack choice; it's that they lack free choice. They couldn't have done otherwise. But like I said, their thoughts are part of the process. It's not like they're excluded from the process. It's not like there's some future event that's there.
Yeah.
And it's rather their thoughts lead to that future event. That's the only one that's the only possibility. Basically, there's no alternate possibility given determinism.
But
Right.
is it also used? Does this philosophy often get used? And this was already mentioned as a means of getting us off of the hook of responsibility. Right. That ultimately
it actually does get us off the hook of certain types of responsibility. For example, there's no justification for retributive justice. Retributive justice is not doable on this no free will position, because the person couldn't have. You can't say that someone is truly to blame if they couldn't have done otherwise.
I think, Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, I think what Peter was saying, though, was that for the individual, they can use it as a scapegoat. The devil made me do it. I had no control. I was drunk. That along those lines, that basically embracing the idea that we don't have free will, and then taking advantage of it and kind of using it as an excuse to justify your behavior. I think that's what he was saying. Like, how do we avoid that? That's
the misconception. Right. Yeah, is to parse through kind of the ideas here, because it's a misconception. So, for instance, you cannot change, but the repercussions of your behavior in a deterministic universe will be the same no matter what. So the question is it in your advantage to change? And in a lot of circumstances it is. And I think there's a myth that people don't change, which also isn't true, and that we live in a universe that's dynamic and is constantly evolving. So change is the norm. It's not the exception. But what you change into is dependent upon circumstances. And this is kind of important to me, because I see in terms of self-improvement, I see two things here that I think can help. So one is that it's easier, at least for me, to problem solve when free will doesn't exist. If I recognize that my willpower is a result of what happens throughout the day, what my genetics are, I can get an insight into how those patterns of will interact with each other. So that way I can counteract certain wills and improve myself in that way, which, again, if you go back far enough, even at that point, I can't say, oh, well, I'm so awesome because I have this insight, because the reason that I've been given this insight is because of books that I read about free will, or books that I've read about meditation that give me a stronger sense of will. So it's never completely free. It's all ingrained in this process. But I think acknowledging that it is a process, that it's a deterministic process, can allow you to modify or kind of get insight into what is actually controlling your will, so that way you can modify it to your benefit. And then the other component that I see that is helpful here is it helps us recognize that sometimes the capacity for change is beyond people's resources. And so it also allows people who are at an advantage or have power to then try to help people, instead of just saying, well, they have free will, they can do it on their own.
I was going to say that because you wouldn't have that information if you didn't have access to those books, if those people didn't write the books, right? If it goes all the way back, in a chain of events, that if you didn't have the exposure, someone else might be in the same situation, but they don't have the same exposure. They've not been privy to the same information, so they make poor decisions. Everything. It's ultimately not really you. It's you and everything else kind of working all together.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys, what's interesting about this is, I understand it fully, but when trying to explain it to a person new to this whole no free will thing or determinism, it's hard to get them to understand it, because there is a little bit of semantics, there's a little bit of language difference between the different co-hosts, how we explain it. And I feel like if one person is not able to explain it in a way that someone will get, somebody else will be able to talk about the exact same thing using a different set of words, and that may actually work. Like, for example, Trick Slattery has explained before. He has some great stuff he's written on this. Like, he explained the difference between determinism and fatalism. Like, under fatalism, whether you recover from an illness has nothing to do with whether or not you call the doctor. You know, that's fatalism, where it makes no difference what you do. The things are fated regardless of what you do. Whereas determinism is something instead happens because of what you do. You know, there's a huge difference between determinism and fatalism, and I've been trying to get people unconfused about that for a long time.
But those are great points, Chandler. I don't want to deviate, but the thought I had before, I wanted to say that it also the idea really helps with sort of loving and accepting yourself. I think what Quayd was saying, I'm not sure if it was Trick or Quayd, but the idea of forgiving yourself and understanding sort of your biological imperatives, you know, your inclinations as a human. It helps with the process of like self-love, of having a healthy self-image, so that you're not condemning yourself, so that you're not on this unhealthy roller coaster of self-condemnation or, you know, egocentric, you know, being overconfident, you know, in your own abilities. It's all about that balance, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. So it doesn't change what needs to happen. So, you know, I eat bad food that I'm not supposed to eat, you know, I lose weight. The repercussion of that is going to be the same. So my motivation to still do that is still there. But what it allows me to do is recognize, like, there are these other factors going on, and that's why I ate that. It allows me to get over it earlier, so that way I'm not just blaming myself, which does not help me at all to just blame myself for doing.
Someone else mentioned this, that it's a psychological, it's a psychoanalytical approach. It's like psychotherapy. This is the approach that psychiatrists and you know, counselors and therapists take. They always try to source the problem. They always try to get to the core root of what's causing the behavior, instead of just blaming the person for the behavior, instead of just punishing. You know, tell me about your mother. Like, you know, what was your childhood like? They always, it's that approach of going back to the chain of events and the causes, as opposed to just attacking the symptoms.
Yeah, see, that's very important, Poffo, because the whole thing of psychology is based on the idea that our behavior has causes. Because if you were to claim a person actually chooses everything in some vacuum, then their past had nothing to do with it, you know? And so how can there be psychology under a belief in free will?
I guarantee you that everything that people are, everything that you see, it all goes back to their childhood. It all goes back to how they were raised, their parents. I mean, they are literally products of their environment. It's nurture and nature, but so much of it goes back to, you know, once you understand a person's upbringing, their childhood, their family, whether their family structure is healthy or dysfunctional, that explains pretty much everything about their personality, you know.
It really does. And, you know, there's something else. I didn't want to interrupt. Peter, were you about to say something?
Well, if you have something, I kind of wanted to interject another perspective in terms of, but if you had something you wanted to add that was, you know, follow up to what you were just saying, I can hold off for a second. Yeah,
I was gonna mention the whole ethics thing, because, see, here's the deal. In kind of psychoanalyzing ourselves about why we believe something is ethical or unethical, it's helpful to think, well, why do I believe that this is right or this is wrong? Why do I believe this? Because I've thought about that recently. I've done a deep search into why I believe that killing is wrong. And I'm not going to get into all that. That's a whole nother podcast. But I'm just thinking about it, realizing that that's got to be the most important thing. I think ethics has got to be the most important thing, but our beliefs about ethics, just like our religious beliefs or our political philosophies or whatever, all of that's caused starting from our childhood all the way to the present moment. And that's an important thing to think. The reach this has, the importance, the relevance that psychology and determinism has to everything.
Yeah, I want to make a point. Like, we were trying to pin down what the greatest the greatest need is in society and what we can do. But it's true that, like, we could say ethics, okay? We could say we have to teach ethics and morals, and like for Peter and myself, I would say, you know, a biocentric attitude, like that life is the most important thing. But if someone else has a completely different experience, if they were raised in a totally different environment, it's not going to jive with what they've been taught, with their cultural conditioning, with the, you know, the sort of the constructs and the paradigms that are already there in place. So that all needs to be taken into consideration, that you can't just teach, even if we're 100% accurate and everything we say is right and true and virtuous and noble. If a person, say, is raised in the South, you know, say like 100 years ago, and they see people of color as less than, you know, and they see the class structure, or going all the way back, you know, whatever their cultural conditioning is, then nothing that we say to them is going to work. So how do you teach ethics until you can change environment? I say don't have kids. Don't have kids until we can get it all straight, you know.
I think this is a good transition to what I was about to add. Okay. So just by using the word ethics brings me to this. I've been doing a good bit of extra research on Spinoza recently. Not just recently, he's been a long time favorite of mine, but I've been reading quite a bit more, and he gets into a good amount about free will and determinism. And Spinoza and his ethics, I think, for a while there, I was beginning to think that Spinoza had a little bit more of an apathetic disposition about the way of the world, and that I needed to refamiliarize myself with his views on free will. And he could be considered, in my reading, as a soft determinist, or somebody who believes, and I agree with this, that determinism may be the factor of nature that is generally in this process of one event is causal to another event. There's not any kind of conscious consideration of what's going on, and things happen as they happen. However, Spinoza pretty much presented this idea that there was an escape hatch from determinism, and that is reason. And in his view, that all things are happening according to their own reasons, and these are not corroborated with the overall bigger picture. And he felt that true reason, not just intellectual cogitating and just wasting, time on thinking anything, but actually getting to the truth of God and the truth of how nature works, reveals to you the patterns by which that you can now transcend the effect that would have normally happened. And that basically that his understanding of reason is a divine transcendent reality that takes you away from your conditioned responses and allows you to act in more or less a Kantian perspective. This is a sort of proto-Kantian view that by acting according to the categorical imperative, which for Spinoza is reason, that you now are no longer acting in the interests of the immediate processes of your organism, that you're acting on reasons that are subtractive from the deterministic reality, and that they actually are higher. And so he did believe that according to the passions that most people responded to, that most people of the world were still like animals responding to interior animal passions, and that most of history was an expression of this, is that it was not according to reason, and that reason had constantly been forfeited for people's political ambitions, for passionate thinking that does not
all driven by instinct.
Reasons.
Yeah, driven by the more primal instincts. That's a perfect dovetail into the idea of evolution, of human evolution. That what I always say, that we are no longer subject to Darwinian evolution. We are actually in control of human evolution, that we can guide and direct the decisions we make based on reason, based on logic, based on common sense, and a more holistic mindset, seeing the big picture instead of just reacting, instead of just responding, as a more primitive animal would. Exactly what Peter's saying. So it ties right in with what I wanted to talk about too, is human evolution, that we're no longer subject to the primitive fight or flight survival mechanisms. They're still there, but we can transcend them because we've evolved to be able to do so at this point.
Before we get into evolution, I just kind of want to address that point because that Peter said, because I don't think that any reasoning that we have would be outside of determinism. So
well, what Spinoza is saying is that reason, like mathematics, is something that is not part and parcel to the actual fact of reality, that it is part of a sort of a Platonic ideal that transcends the things themselves, and that we lock in. And yes, I can understand that in some levels, no matter what you can do, obviously, you can't philosophize yourself out of getting old and dying. You can't reason yourself out of most of the conditions. And Spinoza felt this was true, is that most everything was deterministic. But through reason, that you had this crack, a fissure in determinism, where you could temporarily, at least, because eventually death and all of the weight of all of the things around you would offset it. But so it exists within the determinist realm, but it was basically a fissure allowing you to transcend some of that. I think that from my view, at least, to philosophically maintain a soft deterministic approach, obviously I personally believe in evolution and I believe in causality, but I think that even for the layperson, that there's a dangerous potential for misunderstanding, to where I think many scientists use determinism as a means to get themselves off of the hook for some of their unethical approaches.
I was going to say, Trick, I was going to say it doesn't this comes down to words and semantics, because it actually doesn't go outside of determinism, because it's nature and evolution that have given us the ability to reason, that have given us the frontal lobe and the neocortex, and we have that capacity through causality.
But I'd say it's even more than that. I'd say the specific way we reason at any given moment is causally an output of a causal process, basically.
Right. Everything.
So I mean, it's the specific. There's nothing that goes outside of cause and effect.
Right. I just want to say what we're talking about is just instincts. We're talking about the difference between instincts and human logic and reason. We're talking about primitive, carnal primate
there's different causal processes, of course, but they're all causal processes.
The important thing is there is no escape hatch from determinism, but there is an escape hatch from animal instinct, as some like to call it.
Right.
I'm just saying Spinoza was just saying it using those words, but I understand exactly what he means and what Peter, the point Peter was making.
I think we all get what
in terms of like, being able to use this understanding in the real world. I mean, we do have a model that rejects free will and that works to not, have people like say that they're free from responsibility. In other words, the psychiatric model, the medical model, never blames a person for their diagnosis, whatever it is, yet these people are not led to believe that therefore they are, exempt from responsibility.
It's a tightrope, because I know so many people who've I'm OCD, I'm bipolar, it's just I'm borderline personality disorder, I have general anxiety disorder, and they'll take the diagnoses and they'll just kind of hide under it, and it's like, I can't help it because I'm this. Was that South Park episode?
No, you're right.
I'm an alcoholic.
Right,
it's not my fault. It's a disease. Remember Randy, that South Park episode?
Papa, you're right. I mean, individuals will always try to do that. I mean, we rationalize, but I'm saying it's the medical model. The profession itself doesn't really allow for that. It doesn't say, you have exemption to do what you want because of this.
I don't know. They just put me full of drugs. They just kept, handing me pharmaceuticals. Like, I was diagnosed with, post-traumatic stress disorder, major depression, generalized anxiety disorder, and all they did was give me drugs. And then I had to work my way out of that, and finally help heal myself. I guess I've just never been to a good psychotherapist.
Huh. Yeah,
just been the ones run by the state,
I think this is important, though, because, one is that I think we're talking about reason as an escape hatch, and so it's kind of more as a freedom instead of a convenience, and I really think it's a convenience. Reasoning is a convenience that circumstances allow. And I think if you don't view it like that, you take your focus off of maintaining the circumstances that allow such positive reasoning to happen. I do not at all think that if I had been born in the 1500s or 1600s, that I would have the same view of people of different races or of women. Right. These are things that are conveniences of our day and our time. And if we really want people to continue to think this way or to reason properly, we need to maintain the circumstances under which they happen, which is determinism, not this idea that it's freedom. It's like it's this freeing thing, really that it is a byproduct of circumstance.
That goes back to the exponential growth of information and awareness. Becoming aware of other cultures, becoming aware of other religions, becoming aware of the intelligence of children and Black people and the value of women. It comes from our overall evolution as a species as the world has become more connected, and we've become more tolerant, more accepting, more understanding, more loving and of others.
The feeling I have about determinism, and I probably am one of the dissenting voices here, I would probably be considered by you guys a proponent of free will, as opposed to more or less a type.
Banish him.
Yes. Well, let me finish what my point here is that basically I start out from Spinoza's perspective that reason gives us a foothold into acting according to what is not in our own immediate best interest or into the best interest of the causal realities that are propelling us. And it gives us a chance to act outside of them. That still may be determinist. However, I tend to see that this discussion falls into questions about, this predisposition in your mind sets you up for the next idea that you thought, and that basically it's this process of causality going backwards, and you can't disprove that. And I think that in and of itself philosophically has been dealt with for hundreds of years. My feeling is that the whole idea of determinism actually becomes, and I've been reading on this quite a bit, is actually more of a political idea than it is actually a philosophical idea, because philosophically it goes into a sort of reduction ad infinitum, where you just keep on going backwards, and it doesn't necessarily prove something that you've proven that something caused something before. One way or the other, I'm saying that I think it may be a valid discussion. However, in terms of the actual on the ground effect of this, is that I see yes, determinism gets often used as an excuse to explain certain scientific approaches that don't really recognize the subject of the different creatures that are involved, saying there is no self involved, that everything is a process, a mechanistic process. And I'm not saying that's what you guys are saying. Getting to my point, I'm sorry, it's a little long-winded.
The danger is that this that everything is mechanized, that it's a mechanistic universe, that everything is just.
Yes, well, that would be the danger of the philosophy itself, if not given more of a context. And what I say, and the reason why I say that this question probably deserves or is better seated in a political discussion as opposed to philosophical, is because determinism, largely to me, is about the power of authority and how authorities limit our choices. Now, if you give me a situation where I have 5 different dishes in front of me, each one equally delectable, now we can philosophize all we want about what will make me choose one dish over another and whether that was predetermined and that I could not have chosen the other ones. That's debatable. What I don't think is debatable, though, is that if you have some guy sitting across from the table and you reach out for the lobster dish and he comes and cuts your fingers off with a knife, well, that's basically setting up a situation where you do not have free will because somebody's come in and chosen for you. And I think in a situation where we have no block from our ability to choose things, in other words, there's no political or authoritarian blockade to us doing what we would naturally want to do, that I don't know if there's any other way we could say that determinism or free will. In other words, I'm saying that this is an example of free will, is that if you couch it in political terms, it's very easy to see that we need to be promoting free will, because what we need to do is take away things that are factors that take away choice.
Well, so this is where so like, just to add, I think our perspective on this, or just what my perspective is, but I think other people are going to agree here. So I am a proponent of that. I think you can define free will in such a way that it is technically true, and that would be the circumstance that you just named there, Peter, or circumstances like it. But the issue with me there is that I don't think that that's what most people think when they think free will. And we've had this conversation on the podcast too. That when you say the word free will, it is this phrase that is coupled with connotations that go outside of just this conversation. So I don't have a problem with saying, like, in that circumstance, technically you can label free will to be, well, your will is free from outside restrictions, and so in that sense it's free, sure. But exactly. I feel like if you were to ask people, what do you give me, like, if you ask people, give me an analogy of free will, I think a lot, especially for the religious people, the first thing that would come out would be the Adam and Eve in the garden. And we are not talking simply just about a restriction of will there. We're talking about this idea that you are separate from the soul that God has given you. You are separate from the circumstances of environment with the soul that God has given you to choose freely from environment, which is not founded in science at all, and is very harmful to the way people think in public, I think, anyway.
I think it's conflated with making choices, the ability to make choices. That's it. When most people think of free will, they're thinking that, of course I have the ability to make choices. That's how most people define it.
The other problem, and we've discussed this a lot in detail, is like attempting to defend free will by challenging determinism offers no hope, because the alternative to determinism is that things are not caused. And, logically, philosophically, you can't attribute, something that isn't caused to a human free will, but you can't attribute it to anything.
Everything is caused by everything else, because everything is interconnected, going all the way back to the Big Bang.
Right,
because
but
we live in this connected universe. I'm agreeing. I'm saying that's why you can defend causality and determinism, because we're not on an island.
But my point is, because the traditional defense of free will is that, well, maybe not everything is caused, And so again, as we've explored in so many times on this podcast, that offers no defense for free will, because if we're saying that, therefore we can apply that principle to our human decisions and claim that they are uncaused, well, an uncaused decision can't be attributed to a human being in any logical sense.
Yeah, the point is, whether the universe is deterministic or indeterministic, both are incompatible with the free will that we're talking about. Now, the free will that Peter's talking about is more of a compatibilist notion, which we go into semantics on that at that point, because we understand that lay persons actually have a more they build in more metaphysical baggage than just these disqualifiers, such as not being, not having a gun pointed to your head or something like that. That's
a big thing, is recognizing where the person is coming from. I mean, if they're coming from a fundamentalist background, if they're coming from an indoctrination, then you literally have to use different language. So it's dependent upon who we're talking to.
I think there's a problem. I'm an anti-mechanistic, reductionistic person myself, but I think there's just as much of a problem to remove the mechanistic and reductionist perspective. In other words, a more objectivist perspective from the equation, to be only subjective, to be only anti-reductionist and holistic, is not to actually be able to deconstruct the truth of things. And it's what's coming down. What I think that this really does come down to is, if you don't accept the functional, phenomenal causality of things, then you can allow for miracles, and you can allow for this idea of God blinking his eyes and doing whatever he wants. And yes, that's absolutely something that any reasonable person, I think, needs to be against.
Well, in regards to reductionism and materialism, I'm with you on that. I'm actually anti-reductionist. I believe in downward causation, but that doesn't mean that things are mechanistic. I'm a full mechanistic believer. I believe everything is mechanistic, but and I don't think the two, like, I don't think that mechanistic implies reductionistic. That's not the same thing. So you can have downward causal processes, or basically holistic processes that are entirely mechanistic.
I want to say something.
I agree.
We're all intelligent, bright guys. We're all philosophers, but I'd like to bring it back to what the hell can we do to make things better? What's going to make the world a better place? Like, even if we understand all this stuff, let's talk about application. Let's talk about how we use this knowledge. Like, let's talk about George's original question of is it dispelling the free will myth that's going to change everything? Is it, like I would say, teaching a biocentric philosophy that's going to change everything? What's really going to make the difference, and what's going to allow us to improve and evolve? What can we do in our 70 to 80 years, the short blink of time that we have on this planet? That's what I'd like to talk about, because that part of my philosophy is to only focus on what's relevant and what is applicable to the human condition, basically, like what's going to help society.
Yeah, before we were talking about education being one of the prospects for this fundamental strategy, but then the question becomes what is the most important kind of education?
Right.
Yeah.
And then you have to factor in environment, and then so it's like restructuring society becomes the goal, because literally we cannot have children being raised under brainwashing or being abused and neglected. Otherwise you can't educate people properly. Like, it goes back to, like, where's Jamie? Like, he needs to be here talking about the Venus Project, because that's what it all comes down to, is restructuring society in order to allow for a new philosophy to emerge. Otherwise it'll never take. People respond to their emotions, they respond to aesthetics, they respond to their primal urges and instincts. Like, you can't break through that unless it has to be cultivated. It has to be like nurtured from the beginning.
Yeah, and I think nurturing critical thinking skills is like a key factor here. Like I don't it's not even in junior high or high school, they don't teach critical thinking skills, not until you get into college a lot of times. Yeah. It's crazy. It's like that should be up there with mathematics and English.
Our culture, society is structured this way, that it's to keep people as cogs in the wheel. It's to keep people working, not questioning authority, just doing the menial jobs. That's the reason it's like that.
It's fixed.
We don't want a society of critical thinkers, because they'll question everything and become anarchists, and they'll actually change things. So the elites don't want that. The people in power don't want that. They want to keep people dumbed down and ignorant.
So then, built into this is something that I would like to contribute, is maybe possibly new and helpful, is this idea that part of this is then convincing people with power to do different things with it than what they're currently doing. I
don't think we can convince the people in power of anything. I think they just need to die out, or we need to, the structural system
our whole, wait a minute, guys. Over the last 45 years here in the United States, the Supreme Court was controlled by conservatives who don't want people educated, especially in critical skills, thinking skills, for the reason you just mentioned, Poffo. Now, here's the thing. So, given that Hillary and the Democrats will very likely win that White House, now the balance of power has changed. So, in other words, the new Supreme Court can actually change this dynamic. In other words, what's running our American politics? Money, these billionaires, these corporations. Once you get the money out of politics, and all of a sudden these people that have been holding back progress for decades are no longer able to do that. So in other words,
George, you can't be that naive, man. You can't think that really. The people, Democrat or Republican, who are in positions of power, are in positions of power for their own sake, man.
It's Poffo. My point is, you can't pass anything through Congress, because The
You're saying the judicial branch might be our savior.
Exactly,
the judges are.
And whereas 20 years ago, we might have had very strong reason to doubt that they would. I think any intelligent person understands that this challenge of climate change makes every one of our other challenges pale in comparison. And to the extent that we don't really transform our world, our grandchildren will have no future. So all of a sudden,
scary
there too.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, there's a very strong incentive for at least the Democratic Party to finally get this money out of politics. It finally affects everyone.
Yeah, and I would like to say too that there's different elements here. Like one is I feel like some of this is a generalization. I have to say I have a disdain for people with power as well. But they are still people. They're people who would develop through time and have their own ambitions. And like, again, this goes back to the free will thing for me. Like, if you just see people as fixed, then, they can't change. I'm not going to change their mind. But that is under the free will paradigm. That is under the free will thought where people really can't change. Like,
I'm not saying that they can't change, that they're fixed and stagnant. I'm saying they don't have the inclination to change because they've been raised in a system, in a monetary system that rewards, competition and individuality and all these things that are irrelevant now.
Yeah, because if they didn't, then they wouldn't do the things that they're doing. So that's a said done deal though. But in terms of persuasion, to say that there's no way that we can persuade them is to me an extra step there. It's not just saying, it's saying that we have no influence whatsoever in their decisions. And I think
enlightened people, philosophical, intellectual, moral, virtuous people can try and change the system by becoming, by joining Congress, becoming politicians, trying to get into those positions of leadership. But that's the only way that I could see it changing, because I feel like the entire system, once you're in it, it completely changes you. It molds you. You become, its bitch. I don't see how.
These people are also beholden to the voter base, and they're beholden to donor. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you could influence this thing. It's not just one thing. It's not just like, well, they want money and that's it. I mean,
as Jacques Fresco says, as long as it is a system driven by by lucrative financial means, then the ethical incentive is not there. It's always going to come down to trying to meet their own needs.
Right. Yeah. So I understand that, but what I'm saying is, if tomorrow a lot of people finally said, this is what I want. Like, let's say, 60 to 70% of the nation, the politician's mind, at least nominally, would change. It would.
So you mean the public? You mean the general public, like influencing, putting pressure? Yeah, of course. But again, it can look at what's influencing the general public. I mean, TV, like reality shows, bullshit, sports, like fashion, like materialism. That's what influences religion. Like indoctrination, cultural programming, to think and act and do, to be patriotic. These things are what's influencing the general public. So I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm saying there's not enough of us doing it. We don't have this mass, this force that we can utilize like that. I've been trying to unite like certain secular groups and spiritual groups for like a long time, and they're all just individualized and everybody's sort of specialized in their own way. It's just like the workforce. They're specialized and they have their interests, and they don't see the grand design, the bigger picture, and how we need to work together in unity in order to accomplish anything.
But that goes back to my idea of people with power, though, because so what you named there, you named sports, you named celebrities. I mean, what do these people have in common? I mean, it's rhetoric. I mean, these people have rhetorical influence on the public, and they do it with resources. And so my point is, if you can if you conglomerate powerful people into one group, then you won't see it dynamically. But there are a certain amount of people with power and influence who, if we appeal to them in a certain way, can use those resources to influence the larger public in a
absolutely celebrities. I would say celebrities. I'd say that there's so many celebrity activists who genuinely care, and they've gotten to the point where they recognize they've understood the pleasures of wealth and stardom and popularity, and their better natures are coming out, and they're speaking out, and they're just involved in different activist groups and conservation and animal rights campaigns. So that I would say that it's about getting in touch with the celebrities, because they actually are, in terms of the general public, they are the most influential. Everybody watches movies, everybody is downloading films and influenced. So I would say Hollywood is a huge thing. Social media, YouTube. If you want to promote good ideas, it's all about getting the right people, getting people who are already in those positions. Recognizable celebrities that people love and look up to and respect. Have them talking about. Arnold Schwarzenegger just came out and said he's vegan now, right? James Cameron and Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, that's incredible. Or he's saying, we should
that's good news.
I'm not sure exactly what his position, but he is speaking. He's going in that direction, is what I'm saying, and that's incredible, because whether you think he's a good, politician or not, of California, I'm saying he has that celebrity status, and he's a recognizable sort of, superstar, millionaire. We need the millionaires to give a shit and start promoting these causes. And then people will take notice, and then people will listen. Have a celebrity talking about the free will myth, but using the right language. Have them talking about how blame and punishment and all these different things are outdated and antiquated and completely, counterintuitive to trying to get people to evolve and change for the better. That's what it's all about, is the influence and the right people, having those people who are already in those leadership roles, and people look up to them.
Or scientists as well. I'm glad that popular science is starting to gain a lot of momentum in terms of, scientists gaining celebrity status. There needs to be a lot more of stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, scientists are
all these guys. Definitely.
Yeah, I wanted to say scientists are the only type of celebrity that I pay any attention to.
Yeah.
Because I like it when they're famous because they actually know a few things. So of course I'm a big fan of Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, and
Nye.
Jerry Coyne. Yeah, Bill Nye too. That's the thing, is that scientists aren't famous just because they look a certain way, or whatever it may be, or just because they have good acting talent. Which some of the actors, it's because they're talented actors that they're famous. But scientists should be like the modern celebrity. We shouldn't even.
I agree. In a sane society, in a sane world, it would be, but that's not. People, and Peter would testify to this. People, because of what he's trying to create as well, people gravitate toward aesthetics. They gravitate toward the symbolism, the image, the iconography, the archetypes. Those things resonate with us. We have to appeal to, not only to logic and reason, but to the other aspects. The right brain, the human animal is, very, very much finds meaning and passion and inspiration in things like art and poetry and music, and even making an impression. Like what celebrities do is they make an impact by being memorable, by looking and dressing and acting and talking a certain way. And it's very powerful. That's what's important too. So we can't. Intellectualism is not going to save the world. It has to be a balance of.
Imagine art. Could you imagine those two worlds together then, though? Imagine the world. So what you're saying is people are into this flash. They're into flashy. They're into, rhetoric. They're in the way that you look and dress and say things. Could you imagine scientific minds who recognize this and then dress and behave a certain way in order to influence the public to be more scientifically minded?
Yeah,
that's what
absolutely.
It hasn't happened yet with scientists. I was watching Carl Sagan. I love him, and I'm watching him. I'm sitting here around my friends, and one of them's just he's a dork, and I knew, right? And I know exactly
those creepy turtlenecks that he used to wear. Yeah.
Yeah, the way that he talks, the way that he articulates is very, it's very strange. It's not what people are used to,
my exposure to Carl Sagan, I love Carl Sagan. He's the single most influential person in my life was Carl Sagan. And growing up, this is what I got from my dad. It's like, oh, that guy, he always says billions and billions of stars. Yeah, like all he ever did was make fun of him. And now as an adult, I'm like, this guy was amazing, man. What an incredible communicator, what a poet, passionate, humanitarian, is so intelligent. And yet, like, I'm trying to give you an example, like in my family, my dad watched it, watched the Cosmos series, and he just kind of made fun of him. And that's all I knew about Carl Sagan until I got older. And it's sad, man. Like, it's really sad what people gravitate toward. But I knew all about, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I knew all about Sylvester Stallone, and I knew all about the movies that, the certain heroes and the icons that the celebrities that, receive much more recognition and stuff. It's important that we recognize just how people function, and how we function, all of us.
Yeah. See, here's the thing about it. Now, I agree that people they're not just driven by logic and science. Some of us are. Like, I think some of us really are. Like, we actually care about that stuff. But the general public, yeah, they care more about how somebody looks, or they may like their accent. They may have a British accent, and that makes them cool, which I do think British accents are cool. But but what I'm saying
there's Jamie. Jamie needs to get on here.
Yeah, definitely. And David Joseph, he's been having trouble. His dad's dying and stuff like that, so hasn't been able to join us for a while. But yeah, like, seriously, here's what I'm hoping is I'm hoping that we don't have to turn the scientists into belly dancers just to get the public to watch.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Don't compromise and just make them sell out.
You know what? I don't think that we need to have scientists become belly dancers, but you know what would be nice is if there were more scientists that actually took a stand that was a little bit more of what one of my favorite scientists, Oliver Sacks, a psychologist, a neurosurgeon, or basically, some people would consider him more or less scientific because of his field, neurology. However, he espoused what he called romantic science, and romantic science is science that can embrace the intuitive, can embrace poetry. And I'm not saying, I know that a lot of scientists would hurt their career if they went out there and started trying to talk too poetically. And, a lot of quantum physicists have damaged some of the impression of their own work by being too either poetic or theological with it. However, I think that there is a space to discuss not only theology, but a number of other more, I don't know if it's metaphysics, but issues that embrace the intuition, embrace the other side of the mind that hard science doesn't naturally acclimate to. I mean, part of what makes hard science is its push away from these things. In a lot of ways, it forces them into a place where they can't be balanced. And
there needs to be balance. Yeah, I know people. It's so sad. People say Carl Sagan. He wasn't really he's not a real cosmologist. Carl Sagan, he's a joke. He was just an entertainer. They'll say the same thing about Neil deGrasse Tyson. They'll say the same thing about, I've heard people say it of Carl Jung, that he was just this mystic and didn't really know a damn thing, like that. Then you fall victim to that. They have, people.
But then there's people like Einstein that were not at all like this. And, Max Planck is famous for a lot of his theological statements.
But we truly have to separate the distinction between science and poetry and art and things like that. I mean, it's such a big distinction. You can have people use these other methods to try to get a point across or something like that, but at the same time, that shouldn't be the base of science at all. Like science has to be totally separate from it.
Right. Well, I don't think that it should be separate. Actually, I think it should be expressed and it should be taught poetically. I think it should be communicated poetically because that's what resonates with people. That's what people understand.
But science is like an epistemic standard that we really need clarity of thought. We don't. And poetry is the opposite.
Hold on, Trick. Are we talking about? Is that Trick? We're talking about how it's communicated or how the scientific method is.
I'm talking about both. Like
because of course in the lab
of science, you need to define words specifically. You can't have poetry. You can't have ambiguity. You can't have any of that stuff in science. You have to try to avoid that stuff as much as possible.
What I was sort of wanting to interject is that the science of consciousness, for example, currently the science of consciousness is getting to where you're going to have to ask questions of fundamental ontology, and science is having a real hard time grappling with the issue of, well, what do we do to define something like scientists, many of them, like a Daniel Dennett or Dawkins, will throw out the entire idea of the ground of being, for example, because it doesn't fit into their hard mechanistic perspective. And I
we have to make a distinction between science and philosophy as well. Philosophy gets into a lot of things that science can't get into. Science is
but they have
empirical.
To at some point.
Well, yeah, I agree with Trick. I agree with Trick that science is valuable because it is empirical. It has this system that's very accurate and very demanding. However, like, I also agree with Poffo's perspective that sometimes I think what science has done is it has made our world far less wonderful. You know, before science, everything was miraculous. And so now I think we've lost a lot of that because of science. In other words, like, we're just particles, you know. These clouds are just water vapor.
Right. It's reductionism.
We can conduct science through the empiricism and, communicate it with a combination of empiricism and phenomenological description.
I think Neil deGrasse Tyson does that beautifully. Wouldn't you guys agree that Neil deGrasse Tyson is a perfect mix of that? He's a very charismatic, intelligent, but he's also entertaining. He's found that balance.
Yeah, he gets people interested. Both of these people get people interested based on this enthusiasm that they have for science, and then this kind of more emotional type responses that he has of the beauty of the universe, but it's not anything that is philosophically sound, really. It's just their own.
Hold on a second. It's not philosophically sound to observe something that is so tremendous and extraordinary and so much bigger and greater and more powerful than you and so complex and is eons and eons of of time of natural forces in the making. Like that, there's nothing anti-philosophical or
asserting beauty, for example, using the word beauty, for example, that's in the eye of the beholder. I mean, I don't think, for example, the process of evolution is beautiful at all. I think it's a horrible, negative process.
We've butt heads on that.
We go with this. I think nature is a terrible thing. So
hold on a second, Trick. But again, it's I wouldn't say okay. Beauty can be a subjective term, sure, but let's say it's impressive. The impressive nature of nature.
Poffo. Take for example the Big Bang. The Big Bang. I mean, the entire universe was compressed to the size of a trillion of them can fit on the head of a needle or a pin. That's
even smaller than that.
Mind-blowing.
Yeah, it is mind blowing. I believe that there needs to be that pantheistic sense of wonder and awe. In the communication of science, in order to make it not just trying to sell it, but I wouldn't say I'm trying to make anything look pretty or sexy.
I think it's all about selling it. I think that doing that, it does sell it, and I think that's a good thing. Like, we want to sell science,
sure. I'm saying we're just communicating reality. This is what people don't see.
It's not.
The Hubble telescope.
Saying the beauty of nature is not reality. That's just personal opinion.
I said scratch the word beauty. I said impressive. Like
using that's kind of a subjective word. I mean,
what's the question here? That beauty doesn't exist?
No, that beauty's just a subjective preference. It's just something that.
So
I'm saying a perfect literal example is the Hubble telescope shows people what the cosmos looks like. It shows people what's going on in the power of nebula and stars and quasars and what's going on light years away. That is an observation of reality. Our natural inclination, our sense of wonder, the aesthetic appreciation of it is a natural response. That's not something
it's a
that's
natural
abstract.
response, but it's not necessarily like a rational response. It's more just an emotional response. So you
perfectly rational when you witness something that is so much more powerful, so much older than you, so much more intelligent than you, and then you respond And the whole point is the response. So that the point is it inspires people. Inspiration.
I'm saying somebody could have a negative response, and it's just as rational. If someone has a negative response to all that stuff you're talking about, it wouldn't be less rational. It would be the same. It would be up there the same standard. There's
maybe not
scientific consensus on this type of thing.
Life and evolution presents for each creature that exists what is beautiful to them is what compels them into acting in their natural paradigm.
I agree, and that's why
could be true for humans as well. And when a human perceives beauty, perhaps there is a range, but we can largely, we can say that within the average and normal range of male responses, that the female body is perceived as has beautiful.
Oh yeah, we could say that people have a certain psychology that derive their perception of beauty. For example, in the 50s, heavier set women were more beautiful, and today,
yes, true,
skinnier. So there's this whole perception, there's this whole psychology that entails beauty, but that it doesn't mean it's like it's empirical in the fact that yes, people have these psychologies. That's it.
It's empirical in that we have a beauty response, and not only a beauty response, but that we can also look at different types of symmetries and geometry and so forth.
But it says nothing about the facts, about the scientific facts. It just says something about our own,
Trick. My contention is that the facts themselves, when you see the facts, when you witness and observe what is in reality, what nature is and what it does, that the natural response is inspiration and wonderment and awe, and it leads to I believe it leads to ethics. I believe it leads to ethical and moral behavior, because you're getting the greater picture. I want to say something. I don't think, let's get this straight, I don't want science to become New Age, or I don't want New Age ideas to completely overtake science and the scientific method at all. Like I'm advocating for balance.
I'm not saying that people can't have awe over science or nature. I think that's awe a lot of it's awe-inspiring, yes, for humans, but that has nothing to do with the science, is what I'm saying. So we have to separate the two.
Okay, but it motivates the drive to discover. That's
sure, but it has nothing to do with the facts over science.
Hold on. Now, let me just ask a question here, and I don't want to just be to dominate too much in this conversation. And I like that you're saying it's controversial, but if beauty has an effect in human life, it's almost like science says, well, we can't quantify properly all of the elements of what determine a subjective range of beauty, and so we're going to throw out the entire study, and we're going to
no. I think there's a legit study. There's a legitimate study about what the psychology of people are.
It's not just psychology. That's what I'm saying. We're talking about very powerful structural evolutionary factors that determine the fate of entire species based on what is, the factor of
psychology. I mean, psychology is evolutionary. I mean, yeah.
Last question. Can I interject really quick? You guys hold your thoughts.
It doesn't mean it's things are literally like beautiful or literally awe-inspiring. It just means that people are awe-inspired.
They're just as literally beautiful or inspiring as they are anything else. That the human condition defines what is anything that we know. We don't know.
I mean, there could be somebody that doesn't think that those things are, and their response is just as legitimate. So.
Trick, when was the last time you were inspired? When was the last time you experienced awe? I have to know this. I have to ask this question. When was the last time you looked at nature and felt a sense of awe and inspiration?
I don't know. When I was younger and I had more spiritual inclinations, probably. But
it's very interesting. So what is it in your life that actually motivates you to educate yourself, to write about philosophy? What is motivating, and where does the impetus for this come from? For you?
I have a concern over the well-being of conscious creatures, basically.
Okay, and that concern comes from what specifically?
Empathy.
Your empathy and your concern comes from what? It's your perspective, your perception of living organisms, of what we are.
That stuff is real. I mean, I believe that there's the suffering that people endure or animals endures, and I'm
asking you why is pleasure and fulfillment better than suffering? What in your life? I'm asking you a question. It's very simple. You could say in the last few weeks or last few months or whatever. What impressed you about life so much that you think it doesn't deserve to suffer?
Why not? It has nothing to do with deserving. It has to do with suffering being a bad experiential state.
What makes it bad to you?
It's not. It does not. Nothing makes it bad. That's what suffering is. Suffering is defined as being a bad experiential state.
You're making a judgment call, but I'm saying in contrast to what? Why do you see it as bad?
Well,
because I understand what suffering is. I've suffered. I've suffered in the past.
This is biological.
You're comparing. Hold on, George. Real quick though, you're comparing it to something else though, Trick. You're comparing it to joy and peace and happiness and the concept of an organism thriving. That I'm asking you, when was the last time you experienced that or saw that or witnessed it?
I've enjoyed pleasure and things like that. What are you talking about? Every human does.
Okay. So when you experience that pleasure, you're going to say that it's a completely rational, logical, completely mechanistic experience, which is what's motivating you to do everything else you're doing.
It's a brain experience.
When you experience it, you're thinking in your head, this is logical, this is rational, this is just my sensory.
No, I don't ever equate like pleasure.
You had an experience. This is my point. You had an experience on some level with a child, with a dog, with birds, mountains, with a sunset, an ocean. You had an experience at some point in your life that moved you, that left an impact on you. That there's an enduring impression left there, and I'm telling you that comes from aesthetics. That comes from the experience. That comes.
I'm saying aesthetics itself is just a personal. It's just a personal preference that you have via psychology and your brain state. It has nothing to do with the reality of, like, if I appreciate X, it doesn't mean that X has those qualities that I'm appreciating. It just means that I appreciate X.
Guys, this is biological. Hold on. This is biological.
Go ahead, George.
We take this in two steps. First of all, not just we human beings, but all organisms that are sentient, at least, are programmed biologically to seek pleasure and avoid pain. Okay, that's the first component. The second component is that as long as, especially we human beings, don't have some kind of aberration or illness that hijacks our empathy centers, we're also biologically programmed for empathy. So you put these two together, and so all of a sudden, Trick's empathy for sentient beings is not just psychological; it's biological. That's how we're programmed.
And I'll take it a step further. And I'll say, in the way that I view nature, what I call the omnia, what Peter would call the omni unum, I would say that it is on a certain level, on the most fundamental level, it is good because it is giving us that awareness. It's giving us that inclination. It's the penchant is there to avoid pain and seek pleasure and fulfillment, to self-organize and educate and develop higher and higher levels of consciousness. I'm saying that like nature, of course, nature is blind on a certain level, and it's
not the nature that's good. The only thing that can equate to goodness is our experience of things. For example,
you're not getting what I'm saying, and George would understand this. That I'm saying, why are those tendencies and those instincts there? It's moving in a benevolent direction. I know that I don't believe that the universe is conscious. I'm saying that there is programming written within the laws of nature that carry it in a benevolent direction towards.
No. There's no benevolent direction. I mean, it's just the direction of the least.
You're an example of it. Your moral integrity is an example of it. Your desire to eliminate suffering and
in the animal kingdom, there's about a billion other examples that we can say that go against my.
Stop looking at the negative for a second. You are part of the animal kingdom. You're a Homo sapien. You're a primate.
I know. It travels in both directions. It doesn't just travel in one direction. It doesn't travel in the benevolent direction. It travels
We are the most dominant species on this planet. We're the most influential species on this planet, and we have the ability to empathize. We have the ability to feel compassion. It is moving in that direction. You can't see that?
Oh, I hope it is. I hope it's. I mean, but it's not purposely moving in that direction. It's just a process that's moving in that direction.
Why does the process allow for it? Why does the process allow for it, and why does it seem to dominate when it comes to humans. I know the world is completely chaotic and fucked up, but
there
you
is
know
no
what I mean?
why. It's just a causal process. It's not like
if you don't ask why, man. If you don't ask why, then I take you out of the loop of a philosopher. You have to ask why.
No, I mean I'm saying evolution itself is a causal process. It doesn't ask why. There's no why.
No,
I mean,
it doesn't.
We have
ask why.
empathy. We have empathy because of this causal process. Yes, and there's no reason why we have empathy. We have empathy because it was a survival mechanism at the time, and now we use it for doing benevolent things things that we see.
The potential for this. The potential for all of this was in. Go ahead, Peter. I was going to say the potential was already in the laws of nature, in all of creation, in the Big Bang, in the singularity. So it's already there.
It's not. It's not. We disagree with that point.
It's an emergent property. It's an emergent property, but the potential was already there to begin with. Otherwise,
give Peter a chance.
Go ahead, Peter.
Okay, so what I'm feeling like is that there's, as usual, it's our terminology that is limiting our discussion. And I initially wanted to kind of respond to hearing this idea that our aesthetic responses are programmed over, it's programmed into our biology. Now, on the face of it, taking that information for what it is, I agree with it. However, I think that this idea of using the word programming is similar to when we use the idea like mechanisms and so forth, is that it's a perspective of science at a certain limiting time period of its ability to conceptualize the world. To say, for example, that something is mechanistic is based on this old industrial idea of what a machine is, of cranking gears and so forth. And in the same sense, the idea of programming, to me, is something that sounds a lot like a computer programmer sitting there late in the morning. He's like drinking his Mountain Dew and typing away at all of his code. And I think that that's not a good way of looking at evolutionary history. Evolutionary history is not programming, and it's not that animals and the world are out there, working out some sort of massive play and an art scene. They're creating props and they're doing all this thing consciously. But it's somewhere between the two. It's more of not programming, but the art of evolution. And that I think that by even talking about evolution as if it is a programming process, does strip some of that kind of mysterious awe out of what it is.
Isn't it funny?
It's not just a feeling. It is a mechanistic process, though. It's not like there's.
But hold on, no, it's not a mechanistic process. It's an organismic process.
Organisms are part of the mechanistic process.
Okay, well, explain to me this then. If it's a mechanistic process, can you explain the mechanistic process of what it is that makes something taste good? Because the thing is that what an animal is going to do and choose, and how it's going to choose its future trajectory is based on what tastes good. And it might not even be a question of what makes them healthier or not healthier, but it's that experience of not just pleasure and pain, because taste, for example, is not pleasure and pain. It is an aesthetic judgment that cannot be quantified.
It's a qualitative state of a brain, basically. You have. I mean, I think consciousness is a brain state. So
can I speak?
Go ahead. So I'm saying what I'm trying to say is that the essence of this idea of beauty is so deeply tied into what we call the programming of evolution that whatever we call evolution, it's like, can you say that programming is beautiful? Because I'm saying that the way that nature programs, if we use that word, it programs not through algorithms, but through beauty. Beauty is the fundamental truth, and the algorithm is only an expression.
But it's almost like saying that X tastes good. Well, X tastes good to humans, or X tastes good to certain, things with certain taste buds and certain brains.
But you just said that X doesn't taste good to specific.
Hold on, guys. I need to interject real quick. I want to interject real quick. Hold your thought.
Moment by moment. It's not quantifiable.
Peter,
it's not quantifiable. It's not a fact of the world that X tastes good. It's a fact of the world that X tastes good to a specific configuration of matter and energy.
I just don't think it's appropriate to call it programming, because it's more like people.
Peter, hold up.
Let me finish my stuff. That'll just finish the sentence. It's not programming if the rich people go to a gallery and for whatever crazy reason they pick certain art pieces. It's not just pleasure or pain. I'm saying that what's happening is informed ultimately by aesthetics more so than any kind of rational or any kind of functional.
Yeah, but you
that
get
is
people,
the function.
But you get people that are into Picasso, and you get the people that are not into Picasso, and it all has to do with their brain setup at that specific time. It has nothing to do with Picasso being good or Picasso being bad. It has to do with Picasso being good for the brain state.
It has everything to do with being good and bad, because that judgment is created by the choice itself. The good and bad judgment is what actually determines what is good.
From a human perspective.
Right, but Peter, goodness and badness is predicated on basically our seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. You know,
no, it's goodness and badness is based on what it is that creates a healthy continuance.
We're saying the same thing. In other words, like we consider it beneficial to our species to have like a healthy continuance. So that's good. That's something that's derived from not just pleasure and pain, also, but from the survival instinct. In other words, like these assessments of good and bad are again essentially biological.
Hey guys, I gotta go in like a couple 2 minutes here. So I just want to say that the whole point here is that science, it has to be separate from these accounts of these personal preferences. We can have these personal preferences, and we can use them to get people excited about science, but the science itself
I agree.
is about
I agree,
facts.
Trick,
And these are not facts.
And all I was saying was that not that the scientific method should be conducted poetically, but that it should be communicated poetically. That's all I was saying. I'm in agreement with you about that. And I was just saying that how to get people interested and inspired. It should be told. And the joy of scientists, the joy of of exploration, of learning new things, of discovering and testing and finding the evidence and finding your hypotheses is correct. That should be communicated more, is what I'm saying.
I understand what you're saying there, because that drives people to be enthused about science. But the point is, a lot of it isn't reality. Like when people say, evolution is a great process, I would disagree with that vehemently.
No. I never said it's not ugly.
Not you. I'm talking about other people. Yeah. A lot of people. Yeah. A lot of people I don't know. They seem to appreciate the process of evolution, and I'm saying that's something that we should not appreciate. We should say that.
I don't understand what you're saying there. I think evolution is synonymous with God to me. So
evolution is progress. And even though it's blind. It is progress, man. It's what gives us the ability to think and reason.
If you're not blind and I'm not blind, evolution isn't blind because.
Well, Peter, this is the point. Trick. Before you go, I wanted to make this point. Peter is actually saying what I'm saying, and he's in agreement with me, even though he was disagreeing about my point of using the word programming. See, he's making the point.
I agree with you guys about
semantics. Semantics is so important because of the impression that it leaves in people's minds. I agree with that, and we're actually in agreement. Me and Peter are in agreement, but I'm using different language.
Yeah. By the way, I'm not a fan of the programming word. I think programming entails some kind of programmer, which I don't think there is a programmer. So
a better way to say it is it's latent and inherent in the laws of nature, and I'm saying that it's there because it's already in it. I'm saying that the universe has within it these potentialities, and that's what overall, in a very overall sense, in a very grand, broad sense, is what makes it positive to me.
But even if we accept that it has this potential inherent in it, it's not a purposeful potential. It's
beyond just the potential, though. There's a penchant. There is an inclination. There is this.
See, this is where we disconnect. I don't see any inclination at all. There's no inclination.
Because you're looking back. You're looking back at primitive nature. I'm saying look at yourself. Look at the
humans have inclinations.
Has created what?
Humans have inclinations. Yes, I agree with that.
And humans are a product of nature. And every other advanced biological
4 billion years ago there was nothing with inclinations, is what I'm saying.
Who is speaking just right now? What's your name?
Me and Trick. Poffo and Trick.
Sorry? Trick. Okay. Yes. Just because I know you have to leave, I did want to say that I completely agree with what you're saying about science, and that science is required to be something that retains a subjectivism, and that it is a process that needs to employ skepticism and use measurement and rely upon a specific process. And that I have absolutely no disagreement with, just like I really believe in the separation of church and state, and I think that all those things are important. The only thing is I know you have to get going, and I think that all of your points were said very well, and I don't disagree with you. My only thought is that science is our most amazing tool outside of the brain, and that's
it's our most effective tool. I would agree with you there. Like it's our most reliable. It's our most consistent. Yeah. It's one of our most reliable, consistent methodologies.
But it's not. But it isn't the only tool, and it needs to fit into the place where it remains our tool, and that it doesn't inform our experience as the final only arbiter of what it is that is reasonable or not reasonable to experience. And that
no. I'm not. I don't think it is either. Like I think philosophy is just as important, and which means I'm an analytic logician. I think logic is just as important as science. But I think outside of logic, you have these more creative things, and I don't think they have any say on what you should be believing in. I think they have a say on, things that make what you enjoy and things like that. But actually, they have no say on reality, on what we think reality should be.
I think it does have a say on what we believe. I think that seeing the universe not just as a mechanistic system, but as Peter said, an organismic system or an organic system, I would say, is important because the
two aren't mutually exclusive though. Like you say organistic system, but that is a mechanistic.
How do you define mechanistic?
There is a kind of mechanism. I agree, like with what I think you're saying, and what I think that's kind of how I just wanted to summarize before you headed out. That I feel like as long as these different perspectives are informing each other, and that we don't isolate our opinions and our final conclusions to only the scientific perspective, or only the poetic perspective, or only the theological perspective. If we deny ourselves one of those perspectives, I think that we're missing part of the picture. But if we in other words, if we focus on this one and saying that's the final answer,
I do think
at the turn of the century, like everything's split. Like the church was given the authority over the spiritual, and then science was given, the Newtonian model, and everything became materialistic and mechanistic, and then they weren't allowed to ask those philosophical questions anymore. But before alchemy was both a religion and a science. Like it was both spiritual.
But I do think we have reliable epistemological methodologies, and that in science and logic are the two strongest ones we have. I don't think intuition and things like that are strong at all. I think they're weak. They're poor.
Intuition is just as powerful. I would say maybe not always as reliable, depending on the person. It can be just as accurate depending on the person, the level of say emotional and psychological stability of the person. I would say.
I don't think it's good for.
Intuition is where our minds are going, man. Being able to evolve to the point where we no longer need sensory input, but we can perceive things beyond just our physical senses. Intuition
we have to get into that. I don't believe in that type of thing either, but
I think we have to define.
Hold on, Trick. Hold on, wait. You don't believe in mother's intuition? You've never heard of
I don't believe in women. I don't believe in psychic powers. My
girlfriend
I don't believe in any of that
psychic,
stuff.
Man.
Psychic powers is not mom's intuition.
I'm just saying.
No. I'm saying it's moving in that direction. It's another sensory.
Like for example, intuition on a future event. I don't think that's viable. Reasonable.
I don't teach it or promote it, but I don't rule it out because there is a phenomenon that's going on there. There is something going on there, but I don't think that it's a reliable method for determining the state of things. But what I'm saying is like that it is like a form of human perception. It's animals have intuition, man. Animals can sense things that what you can reduce it down to biology and their connection with the earth, kind of like the magnetic field, things like that, the homing instinct. So, but I'm saying they're just processes that we don't yet understand.
There's
wouldn't go around telling people trust your intuition no matter what. I would say trust logic and reason.
When we're talking about like understanding the universe and understanding what reality is and what we should believe in, I think we need stronger methodologies than intuition. We need logic. Methodologies. We need logic. We need science. Those are the strong methodologies that we need for understanding what reality is and is not. We can have intuitions on other things, that's fine. But
hey, Trick, how about you and I have a one-on-one sometime? Because I've been trying to do that for a while because I wanted to explain some of this stuff to you, like where we veer, and
well, I'm sure we'll have an interesting conversation. But I really do got to go because I'm supposed to be gone.
But let's set that up sometime, man. I hope your back's feeling better and everything. And let's set that up.
Sounds good. Certainly.
All right, man. Thanks.
Hey, see you guys later.
Great talking to you.
Nice meeting you, Peter. Take care. Bye-bye.
Be safe.
Bye.
Yeah. There's so many things I've wanted to say, but you guys were having this disagreement over beauty and mechanistic and organismic and all this stuff. And here's my thought. Like, guys, I think about it, and there does seem to be too much of a separation between, the pleasure that people experience emotionally, their experience of things, and then the scientific method. It does seem like people act like it's one or the other. And yet what I would say is that these things about pleasure and pain, or the goodness or the badness or the beauty or the awe, all these things are scientific questions. These are things that are being experienced. And so it's sort of like I wish that people could see it's all part of one big package. It's not like
holistic thinking, man. It goes back to holistic thinking. That like science and religion, right now they're incompatible, but they shouldn't be. They're incompatible because of the shit that religions teach, and because of how dogmatic scientists are. Yeah.
Just like it's so clear to us that free will is impossible. Yet that's not a mainstream standard understanding in science. I agree with you, Poffo and Peter, that this paranormal phenomenon, it has exhaustive evidence from Princeton and Stanford and Duke.
It needs to be explored. It needs to be investigated. Absolutely. We should not go into it with predetermined.
What I'm saying is that it has already been explored, and there's extensive evidence. Just like, in other words, how like the argument against free will is so ironclad, so irrefutable. The evidence for paranormal phenomenon is probably similarly strong, very strong, but it's just like the world isn't ready to accept it. So,
it's funny. It's a funny thing. The world is accepting it on an entertainment level and on a mythological level. With the cultures do accept it, but we don't accept it based on the science. And I would say let's do it based on the science.
People report paranormal phenomena. Over majority do. You're right. The scientists don't just accept it. Right.
Well, yeah, there was something Peter said earlier that I thought was important. He doesn't like the whole reductionistic, mechanistic way that people describe things. And for me, I tend to think that reductionism is a wrong word. And what I mean is that things aren't being reduced. They are simply being explained. They're being explained, but nothing's being reduced. It's the same stuff that's there. We're just talking about it differently.
That I've been called a reductionist. I mean, it's weird.
Reductionism is largely about sort of like focusing in with a microscope. And as you get closer and closer, you do understand and explain the mechanisms better. And there's always further you can go into it. I think the problem with reductionism, as I understand it, is trying to apply some truth to the overall system by the mechanism. If we understand that it goes, the mechanism is based on some sort of like a a binary system, that it's either chooses a 1 or a 0 in any kind of particular, fundamental, if we get down to the fundamental and say it's 1 or a 0, people will extrapolate from that the system itself is completely binary. And I think that there's just too much of a inclination for people to extrapolate truths about the system exclusively
without looking at the system, without looking at the whole system. They're looking at like fragments of the system. That's the problem.
Right, and so it's really important.
The beauty of a living thing is not the atoms that go into it, but the way those atoms are put together. Carl Sagan.
Yeah, the other thing about reductionism is like you're always going to reach a point with anything that you explore that you can't explain why that is. You go as deep down into particle physics, there's always going to be the point of like, well, why, an unexplained part of this phenomenon we seem to
that's where I would say that's where philosophy takes over.
Yeah,
I would say that science and philosophy need to go hand in hand. And science combined with philosophy creates an idealized form of spirituality. That's my take on it, is that when you take science and you ask and you answer the questions and you use the empirical data and you use the scientific method and testing and observation and a repetition of the experiment and blind studies and all this stuff, then take that and then step back and ask the deeper philosophical questions, and you can use your own reasoning and logic to come to the answers, not inject mythology and predetermined answers. I was going to say before, George, about investigations of paranormal activity, paranormal phenomena and stuff. We can't go into it with preconceived notions. And it's a ghost, it's a spirit, it's a disembodied. We just need to observe the evidence and then connect the dots and put it together. But that's the problem with so much
and you want to know, when you dig into the paranormal skeptic,
it becomes biased.
Basically there have been like research where like these skeptics like Randy, whatever, they have been presented with the evidence of paranormal phenomenon, and their argument, fundamentally has been reduced to, well, we can't accept this evidence because we can't understand the mechanism that underlies it. And that argument is not scientific. In other words, if we applied that argument to gravity, we would have to conclude that gravity doesn't exist, because we can measure the effects of gravity. We have no idea. We haven't detected a gravity particle. We have no idea of the mechanistic aspects of gravity.
Right.
So in other words, then this applies to, again, you can't refute a phenomenon because of a lack of understanding of its mechanism, which is what's used with the free will thing and with the paranormal.
So I agree with you, absolutely. So I've butted heads with Trick and a few others on the show, like many, many, many times, and it always comes down to this: is that I believe they are not using their philosophical assets. They're not asking those questions, because I believe this. I've seen this with staunch materialist atheists. They already have a predetermined bias. They already believe that something can't be true. So they're not open to it. They literally can't expand their mind, and that's not scientific. You need to just be able to observe the evidence and look at things for what they are. I keep trying to say this. I don't know if this ever gets across, but I keep bringing up the question: why does evolution? Why does it do what it does? Why does it do what it does? Bring about the results that it does? How is it possible that in the singularity before the Big Bang, or whatever, the singularity was outside of time, how could it have had all the potential for all of this, and all of this has come about on this planet and no doubt countless others, and yet think that there's not a penchant toward intelligence, toward greater and greater levels of consciousness, like a penchant, an inclination toward benevolence in terms of us, the highly evolved sentient sapient beings who can now exhibit altruism and compassion. Nature brought this about. This is what's come about via nature. I know you're in agreement with me, George.
Absolutely, and the argument to that is that, we can understand the mechanism of human intelligence in terms of our biology, But since we can't understand the mechanism of universal intelligence, we can't ascribe to it. So again, it's with intelligence, you have to define what's intelligent not by its mechanism, but by its manifestation.
And I would say it's all biological. It's all biological. It is an organic system. Peter would say an organismic system, but I think that sounds too much like orgasm. So,
yeah. Well, guys, yeah. See, this has been such a great talk, and see,
orgasms are great too. Orgasms are awesome.
Well, I probably would disagree, or I might agree if I knew what an orgasm was. But that's a whole nother podcast right there. But yeah, what I want to say is, I mean, there's always going to be something, no matter how much science we do, there's always going to be something that we don't understand. But I feel like, yeah, whatever the case may be, we can always take a look and we can be in awe, or we can say something is beautiful or whatever, because there's stuff to be amazed about. And I don't feel like I feel like science has a bad reputation because that people think that you have to be boring and dry to have facts and be a scientist. And I'm like,
it might have to do with the personality types, and those who were more inclined to study science, those who are more scientifically minded, and then those who are more poetic and aesthetic and creative and artistic and emotional and passionate. I think it has to do with the individuals involved in the execution of these things, I guess.
Yeah.
So
I think
that's
so.
what ended up being presented. That's what ended up the stronger influences came from those people who happen to have those qualities, those characteristics. It's all about having a good balance of both, though.
Yeah, I feel it's the personality types, the type of personalities of the people who become scientists, and tends to be people who tend to be not as emotional. They tend to not experience some of the greatness that other people do experience, and everyone's on a scale of that. You know what I mean? Like, some people are just more focused on the facts, and they're not all concerned with being poetic or however you describe it. Whereas other people are just always in the emotional way of being and focused on happiness and don't care about the facts. But in the end, what I have to say is, science, being the study of, how things really work and what causes what, is a tool. It is a tool to enable us to change the world. And of course, it could be for the better or worse, and we hope it's for the better. But yeah, given that it's a fact that beings do experience pleasure and pain, science is our way to increase pleasure and reduce pain. And I feel like if we divorce science from experience, as too many people do, then then science becomes impractical in a sense.
We wish to find the truth no matter where it lies, but to find the truth we need imagination and skepticism both. We will not be afraid to speculate, but we will be careful to distinguish speculation from fact. It's all about balance, man.
Yeah, definitely. And there's always
is that your quote, Poffo?
It's Carl Sagan. But thank you for that compliment. No, it's Carl Sagan.
Yeah, but I mean, really, there's always some experience, some desire that leads to us even wanting to know what the facts are. So I think that's important. Science, it actually does come secondary to what emotionally appeals to us, because
that's what drives us. I mean, think of the caboose, and it's the fuel. I'm saying in a train scenario, the fuel, the coal burning, that's passion, that's emotion, that's we need that. We can't let go of that, man. Me and Peter butt heads sometimes, because I like the idea of transhumanism and where it's going, and he I believe would contend for a more that we should embrace our animalistic self and not lose touch with that. And I agree with him, but I believe that technology is an extension of ourselves. I think we talked about this before, Chandler. We talked about this, that everything is really just an extension of us, and we don't need to fear it. But we can incorporate these things into our biology, and I don't have a problem with that at all, as long as, it's not being controlled for nefarious reasons,
Oh, yeah, and by the way, I wanted to thank Peter Moriarty. Is that how your name's said?
Pretty close. Moriarty.
Yeah.
Moriarty.
Better than most people.
Yeah, Peter Moriarty or whatever. Yeah, Peter, I wanted to thank you for joining us. Yeah, see, I actually didn't get a chance to talk to you very much beforehand because I was having the whole technical difficulties, couldn't log into Skype. But yeah, I think this is the first time you've joined us on one of our podcasts. And Poffo's mentioned you a few times that you're his friend. This is the same friend, isn't it, that had the thing he called biotheism?
Yes.
And
yes.
I'm posting in my group as we speak.
Yeah. Peter is the founder and creator of organismic philosophy and biotheism, and Chandler came up. Well, tell them the story, Chandler.
I can tell you that story. Yeah. See, George and I have an old podcast. In fact, you can listen to it if I find which one it is. And I titled it Biotheism and Intentional Evolution. It was just the two of George and I, just the two of us, and we were talking about evolution being a process.
You know what? Wow. I swear. Okay, so that's where I recognize your voice, because I think I had shared this your discussion with Poffo, and then I shared it in my group, and I was like, this, these guys are really covering like so much of the information. That I was like,
there you go.
Now I'm remembering
it's
that
Chandler.
I actually have shared that discussion, and I was like, there's not a lot of people out there making that discussion.
I've been trying to get Peter on here I've been trying to get Peter to join us for like weeks and weeks, Chandler.
Yeah,
I've been telling him about it like every week.
Yeah, it's really cool. I'm glad you shared that because it was a real fun talk. Because see, the biotheism term. Basically, because, George called himself a pantheist, and so, I just take, like, pan meaning all being God, but I changed it to biotheism for what I was calling it at the time, because whereas God being life rather than just the universe, I think life being more descriptive, because when we think of life, we think of an organism. We think of some animal or plant. Whereas I think the problem is that pantheism, we tend to just think of stuff that's not conscious when we talk about the universe. Whereas
it's too abstract. You just say everything is God. God is all. It needs to have that biological that focus on nature and on life. Absolutely. That's
right, and that was my way of saying that for me, life is the most awing experience. Life is like the most important thing. And I've said before, I don't know if I've said this in a podcast or not, because now I call myself atheist because I don't believe in the monotheistic biblical God of Christianity, obviously. But I say that each person kind of has their own God in the sense there's something that's most important to them that takes priority over everything else. And sometimes it's alcohol, sometimes it's sex, sometimes it's science. It could be anything good or bad that's most important to that person. So in that sense, I just think of, like, for me, life is the most important thing, the top priority. And so but it doesn't mean that I actually believe in a God. So that I think
none of us believe in in the traditional theistic God, an anthropomorphic, personal, conscious God with volition and intent. Peter may delve a little bit into the more mystical when it comes to that, into how
it's our
conscious
psyche.
The universe
is.
It's
a mixture of our psyche projecting itself into a mysterious cosmos that. The cosmos itself there are properties that, we can't necessarily define all of them, but I know at least there are certain properties of the universe that, hold on, Connie was in the room. I was just saying that it's kind of hard to explain. I posted just momentarily ago about Omniunum, and so it's funny that you mention all of this because it completely crosses over. But
there's something and there's where I have to concede that synchronicity. I still experience synchronicity, man, and I can't explain it. Like I could be my brain making the correlations, connecting the dots, and we're pattern-seeking primates. But things happen, man, and it just seems like it really, really repetitively seems like there is a greater there are greater forces at work. There are greater forces at work, but uniquely, specifically speaking to me, influencing me, guiding me. And that's one thing that I don't even know if I want to say struggle with it, but I've yet to be able to nail down and define, because I don't believe in a personal God. I was just going to say that none of us believe in the God of theism. I believe God is nature, and I think we can all safely say that we all have a biocentric attitude, that life is the most important thing. That's all I care about.
That's the thing. Yeah, I like that it's centered around life. I really like that term. But of course, there's always some double meanings. Like of each word, there's always different understandings of it. But one thing I wanted to say now, while I have been a critic of using the word God to describe the universe, because it's confusing, because as you know, for most people in the world are Christian, Jewish, or Muslim, who use the word God to mean something else quite different than a pantheist does. But at the same time, there's something else very important that I wanted to say, and you guys will understand this. Why should we let the Christians, Muslims, and Jews have a monopoly on that word?
Why should we let them have a monopoly on anything, on righteousness, on fellowship, on human solidarity, on absolutely, like on mythology? I think that atheists and pantheists should unite and literally present the world an alternative to monotheism.
Because I agree, because
monotheism has done extraordinary amounts of harm, like
it has done all kinds of harm. But what I think that is misunderstanding about monotheism is how often that it becomes a repeated theme, that some of the greatest thinkers from within the different traditions, whether it be Sufis within Islam, whether it be mystical Christians within Christianity, there have been people who, and even definitely Maimonides, I may be pronouncing his name, is one of the greater speakers in the Judaic tradition. And many of the speakers who are the ultimate authorities speak of a type of tradition at the core of their own theology that blows away the common conceptions that are held by the person on the street that claims to be a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew, even a Buddhist. It's like the general adherent to these religions is actually believing in a completely a bastardization of the tradition that, yes, there are groups and fundamentalist factions within every religion that promote a misunderstanding. But I think philosophically, if you look through and you get into a lot of the writings of some of the highest teachers within each of these traditions, they promote what tends to be and what I interpret as a type of pantheist interpretation. And right now, what I've been really reading as I posted about my own conception of God on my page is this concept of apophatic theology, if I'm pronouncing that correct. And apophatic theology represents this idea of cutting away all of the discrepancies. It's a negative way of looking at God. Instead of describing God by his attributes, we cancel out what attributes can't be really logically superimposed onto God. And if you guys could just check that out, look up apophatic. It's APOPHATIC. Look that up. It's a wonderful description of how I see God as being a way of looking at things that are not about, let me describe his character and let me describe him and superimpose and project my human understanding of God on these things. This is what humans are constantly doing, is projecting this human, our temporal and incarnate values onto something that is ultimately abstract. And this thing, this apophatic theology says that God is this abstraction. And that
how much time you got, Chandler?
Well, actually, I was already supposed to be in bed. It's just that so much of the discussion I felt got wasted by that semantic argument between Trick and Poffo and Peter. I mean, I felt like that was very unproductive because Yeah, because our topic was about making the world better, and people improving without free will. But as usual, it always gets sidetracked when two or more co-hosts have some disagreement over words. It's always these silly words that trip us up. But
it's not just words, Chandler, because we're coming from different perspectives. That's why Trick and I are coming from different. I do believe words get in the way.
Chandler,
it is important.
Like misunderstandings. It really is important to gain agreement on our terms.
Yeah, I agree that it's absolutely essential that we do that. Unfortunately, I just don't like the process very much because there's so much I want to get to, and it's like, man, there's these disagreements we have to clear up. And what's interesting is I do agree it's more than just words because, see, I would describe myself as atheist and materialist and stuff like that, but at the same time, there is a difference in the mindset of Trick and I. We're still very different people that disagree on a lot of things, so there's a big old mindset of difference between two people who use the same labels to describe themselves.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that going on, and I do need to officially close this episode. But yeah, I mean, this has been a really good talk, and of course, it's an ongoing discussion. But yeah, we've talked about some great stuff, and I hope Peter joins us again some other time.
invite him back. Tell him.
I got a lot out of it, and if we were defining and setting up a distinction between understanding of terms, I feel like I understand where everybody's coming from a lot better, and so it was very effective to at least to get on the same page with everybody, and so to me it was very productive discussion.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, Peter. So has anyone said everything they wanted to, or should I just do the official closing?
I just want to try and set it up where me and Chandler and Peter and George can probably talk again maybe during the week. We should do like another impersonal opinion or whatever. Was this an impersonal opinion or was it the free will?
Oh yeah, this was the free will, science, or religion. Okay. There's so much that all of us have to talk to that we want to go beyond the free will topic into some other things. So yeah, we definitely can do some more impersonal opinions and stuff, and we should try to make some of them Google Hangouts and stuff too, because that would be really cool. Because I know how to set it up.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that this week, man. Like Google Hangouts seems an easier interface if that's all right with everybody, and let's try to focus more on actually what we believe and how to move forward.
I think that would be really cool. So that's what we'll do as soon as we can. And so is everybody ready for me to close this one?
Sure. Sounds good.
Okay, well, you've been listening to Free Will, Science, and Religion, and we started out clearing up some confusion people have about the free will topic, and we were talking about how to make a better world, and part of making a better world is for people to discuss the terms of their disagreement so they can understand each other better, because we all have to be on the same page in order to make progress at a better world. So I feel that overall this was a very productive discussion, and I hope that everyone listening to this learned something. So wherever I post this, I hope that people will send their comments what they think of this too and give us some feedback. Yeah, so I guess thank you for listening and goodbye.